Ma'am, I don't know how you got this seat, but lobster and steak aren't meant for passengers like you. Here's a sandwich. Don't make it difficult. Those were the exact words that cut through the quiet hum of Aero Elite Flight 452's first-class cabin. Passengers looked up from their glasses of champagne. Forks froze mid-air, and the air grew heavy with disbelief. Imagine sitting in seat 1A, having paid full fare, your name printed clearly on the manifest, and hearing that from the very person assigned to serve you. Before we dive deeper into this story, where are you watching from? Comment below, hit like, and subscribe to help share truth and justice. Now, let's begin this journey. Olivia Harper, 42 years old, founder and CEO of Harper Innovations, had spent decades climbing mountains most people never even saw. From Harlem roots to MIT classrooms, from nights of rejection in Silicon Valley to building a company now valued at over $3 billion a year. Her story was one of resilience forged in fire. This morning at JFK Airport in New York, she was not boarding just any flight. She was on her way to Los Angeles to finalize a $5 billion deal, a contract that would set the course for the future of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. She had chosen Aero Elite's Flight 452, a flagship route. With the expectation of dignity and professionalism in first class, Olivia had pre-ordered her meal days in advance. Lobster salad followed by grilled steak, a simple act of self-care before negotiations that would shape the industry. It was her quiet way of telling herself, "You belong here, no matter what anyone thinks." But as the plane leveled at cruising altitude, the anticipation of that meal turned into a moment she had faced too many times before. Disrespect wrapped in politeness, discrimination disguised as error. The flight attendant, Sarah Jenkins, blonde, 35, born and raised in a small Texas town where biases were inherited like family heirlooms, stood by her seat with a tray. On it sat nothing but a cold chicken sandwich wrapped in plastic and a paper cup of water. Sarah's voice was firm but patronizing as she leaned closer. "I'm sorry, Ms. Harper. There's been a system error. Your meal isn't available." Her tone carried the unspoken message. "You're lucky enough to be here. Don't ask for more." Olivia took the tray with calm hands, but inside, she felt the sting. She had seen this pattern too many times, in boardrooms where she was mistaken for an assistant, at conferences where her name tag was ignored until she took the stage, and now, here, in seat 1A, where money and status were supposed to equal respect. She was once again reminded that her skin color could erase it all in a second. But Olivia was not the kind of woman to explode in anger. She had long learned that measured silence was sharper than shouting. She placed the sandwich on her tray table, pulled out her phone, and quietly opened an app designed by her own company. This was not just any app. Harper Innovations had created a discreet security and audit system for executives who traveled often. With a few taps, she scanned the attendant's badge, AE7421, Sarah Jenkins. Within seconds, a profile began to build. Employment history, prior complaints, internal reports. Olivia's eyes narrowed as she saw 4 complaints in the last 18 months, all from passengers of color, all describing similar treatment. The sandwich in front of her was no mistake. It was part of a pattern. At the same time, in Manhattan, her assistant Maya Ruiz received a coded message. Emergency audit, AE7421. Maya, 28, Latina, fiercely loyal, had been through her own battles with sexism in past workplaces. She knew exactly what to do. She logged into Aero Elite's internal systems, digging into cabin footage, service logs, and complaint files. Within minutes, she messaged Olivia. "Confirmed. Jenkins has 4 complaints. Same behavior. This isn't random." Olivia's memory flashed back to 2010. She had been invited to a tech gala in San Francisco, dressed in her best evening gown, only to be mistaken for a server by a man who later tried to pitch for her investment. She remembered his shock when she told him she was the keynote speaker. That same fire stirred now. She would not let this pass. Around her, first-class passengers enjoyed caviar, champagne, lobster. Thompson, a venture capital CEO, clinked glasses with Ellis, a Wall Street analyst, while Ramirez, another businessman, laughed at a joke about tough clients. Sarah glided between them, her smile warm, her hands quick. Olivia timed her. 25 seconds from order to delivery for the white passengers. For her. It had been 4 long minutes and the wrong meal. Every detail was evidence. Every moment was a record. Sarah leaned toward her colleague, Daniel Hayes, a 40-year-old attendant with a reputation for smug indifference. Olivia caught the whisper as she adjusted her smartwatch to record. What's she doing in 1A? Probably just lucky. Daniel smirked. Ignore her. She'll eat the sandwich and stay quiet. Their words hung in the air like poison, meant to stay hidden but now preserved forever in digital clarity. Olivia didn't flinch. She sipped her water, eyes calm. But her mind raced. She knew this wasn't about one sandwich. This was about every boardroom where her voice had been dismissed, every classroom where her hand had been ignored, every airport lounge where she had been second-guessed. This was about the unspoken rule that power had a color, and she was rewriting that rule in real time. She typed a quick note to Maya. Expand audit. Look into Daniel Hayes. Maya replied moments later. On it. Data began streaming. Daniel, too, had prior warnings. 3 for inappropriate comments. 2 for service negligence. A pattern of bias and arrogance. Together. Sarah and Daniel were symbols of a deeper rot inside Aero Elite's polished brand. Olivia opened a secure folder and began drafting a preliminary report. Service time disparities, complaint records, whispered comments captured on audio. She compiled it all, attaching screenshots and charts Maya had generated. Then she sent it directly to Robert Kane, Aero Elite's CEO, with the subject line, Urgent Bias Audit. Flight 452, Seat 1A. She leaned back, not with anger, but with a calm resolve that unnerved anyone who underestimated her. This was no longer just about a meal. It was about accountability. And Olivia Harper had never lost a battle when truth was on her side. As the engines hummed over the Midwest, Sarah whispered again, She's lucky to even be here. Olivia glanced out the window, the clouds glowing under the morning sun. Lucky? No. She was prepared, determined, and ready to turn a cold sandwich into a firestorm that would shake an entire airline. This was just the beginning. The cabin settled into its mid-flight rhythm, but for Olivia Harper, every sound carried weight. Every whisper became a clue. Every detail mattered. The hum of the engines mixed with the soft clink of cutlery. Passengers laughed over champagne, and attendants moved with practiced grace. But she noticed the difference. She always did. Sarah Jenkins floated toward Thompson and Ellis with caviar and a refill of vintage Dom Perignon. Her smile wide, her voice cheerful. 25 seconds. Olivia counted in her mind. From request to delivery, when Olivia herself had asked for her pre-ordered meal. It had taken 4 long minutes and ended with a cold sandwich tossed down like an afterthought. That disparity was no accident. It was the kind of bias that hides in the cracks of professionalism, subtle enough for deniability, sharp enough to leave scars. She tapped her smartwatch, setting it to record every motion, every word, because experience had taught her one truth: evidence, silences, excuses. Sarah leaned over Daniel Hayes, whispering as though Olivia couldn't hear. What's she doing in 1A? Probably just lucky, right? Daniel smirked, brushing a hand across his neatly pressed uniform. Ignore her. People like that complain, but they don't matter. The words slid through the air, quiet enough to be deniable, cruel enough to reveal the truth. Olivia didn't flinch. Her face remained calm, her body language controlled, but inside she felt the memory of another insult rise. The night in 2005 when she was accused of stealing a laptop at MIT's library, only to prove it was her own device purchased with the scholarships she had fought for. She had learned that day the importance of turning humiliation into documentation. Now, decades later, she was doing it again. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but edged with steel. "Excuse me." "Sarah," she said, tone calm but unmistakably firm. "I am a Platinum Elite member. I ordered my meal 10 days ago. Would you care to explain what priority means in your system?" Sarah froze for a beat, then forced a smile. "I told you. Ma'am, there was a system error. These things happen." Olivia's gaze didn't waver. System errors don't decide who waits 4 minutes and who waits 25 seconds. The passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension they weren't used to in the polished air of first class. Thompson muttered to Ellis, "Always someone trying to make trouble." Ellis chuckled quietly, shaking his head. She should just eat the sandwich. Olivia heard them, stored their words, and pressed her smartwatch to confirm the audio had been captured. Thousands of miles away in Manhattan, Maya Ruiz worked quickly. Olivia's coded message had reached her, and she was already pulling data from Aero Elite's back-end systems. Her fingers moved like lightning across her keyboard as she accessed service records, complaint files, and crew assignments. The numbers began to paint a damning picture. Sarah Jenkins, 4 complaints of racial bias in service. Last 18 months, Maya muttered, scanning faster. Daniel Hayes, 3 prior warnings. Sexist comments recorded in staff notes. She highlighted sections, generated charts, and compiled timelines. Then she called Olivia through a secure line. "It's not just today. This is a pattern. She serves white male passengers faster, more often, and with better selections. I've got timestamps from footage. Your wait time was 4 minutes. Theirs, under 30 seconds. Olivia's calm expression never broke, but her heart surged with grim validation. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't exaggeration. It was measurable. Evidence was forming brick by brick into a wall no one could climb over. She whispered back to Maya, her lips barely moving. "Compile everything. Add internal emails if you can find them. Search keywords, high-tipping clients." Minutes later, Maya responded, her voice tight with anger. "Found it. Internal messages between attendants. Prioritize high-tipping white men in first class. They're the ones who matter." Direct quote. "This is gold." Olivia's eyes flicked to Sarah, who was now laughing softly with Ramirez, the businessman in 1C, pouring his second glass of wine with care she hadn't bothered to show her. Olivia took a sip of her water, the taste bitter now, and let silence be her shield. She had no need to raise her voice. Silence paired with proof was more powerful than any outburst. Daniel strolled past her seat, giving her a quick glance that carried arrogance, as though he believed she was powerless. Olivia stopped him with one line. "Daniel, what's Aero Elite's official policy on bias?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Olivia's voice sharpened, still quiet, still calm. "You heard me? Policy on bias. Do you know it?" Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He cleared his throat, muttered, "We treat all passengers with equal respect," and hurried away. The stumble was captured on her watch, another piece of the puzzle. Olivia turned her gaze back to the clouds outside the window, whispering her grandmother's words in her heart. Justice is not revenge. Justice is measured. She had won lawsuits before, had forced partners in 2015 to pay millions in settlements for discrimination. This, however, was not about money. This was about truth. Maya's voice came again, steady but urgent. "I'm compiling a 12-page report, graphs, complaint histories, Crew analysis. It'll be ready before you land. I'll send it straight to Robert Kane's inbox. He can't ignore this, Olivia whispered back. Add the recordings, every word, every delay. Make it impossible to dismiss. Around her. The privileged air of first class continued. Thompson adjusted his cufflinks. Ellis scrolled through stock updates. Ramirez laughed too loud at his own jokes. To them. She was an inconvenience. To herself. She was an instrument of change. The plane crossed the Rockies, turbulence jolting the cabin, but Olivia's mind stayed razor sharp. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago. Outsmart. Don't outshout. That phrase had carried her through boardrooms filled with dismissive men, through investors who doubted her vision, through Silicon Valley corridors where she was the only black woman in the room. And now it carried her through this sky, where she sat with a cold sandwich and a fire of resolve. She typed a final note to Maya. This isn't just about me. This is about every passenger who's been silenced, every woman, every person of color who swallowed humiliation because they didn't think they could fight back. We will fight back, Maya replied within seconds. Already happening. I've traced passenger posts. At least 2 people in the cabin are tweeting about slow service to you. Hashtags are starting. You're not alone in this. Olivia smiled faintly, a smile invisible to Sarah and Daniel, but heavy with meaning. The whispers of gossip, the smirks of arrogance, the so-called system errors. Soon they would unravel under the weight of truth. For now. She sat still, calm, collected, waiting for the moment to strike. Because the best counterattack was always patience armed with proof, and Olivia Harper had both in abundance. As the flight pressed westward across the vast expanse of America, the tension in first class felt less like luxury and more like a battlefield drawn with smiles, whispers, and hidden prejudice. Olivia Harper sat steady in seat 1A, her expression calm, her presence unshaken. But behind that exterior, a storm of calculation brewed. She was no stranger to humiliation disguised as oversight, no stranger to bias cloaked in politeness. Yet, this time she held every advantage: technology, preparation, and the patience to strike when her evidence was undeniable. She opened her phone once more, secure app humming quietly, and reviewed the growing case file Maya Ruiz was assembling in Manhattan, charts of service times, logs of prior complaints, screenshots of biased internal emails. It was all piling up. Maya's voice came over the encrypted line, sharp with focus. Olivia, I've cross-checked Sarah's service patterns over her last 20 flights. She has a 92% bias index. That means in nearly every case, she delayed or downgraded service for passengers of color compared to white passengers. Daniel isn't far behind. His name shows up in 3 incidents where complaints were marked resolved with warning. Olivia absorbed the numbers, her mind linking them to the whisper she had captured earlier, the smirk on Daniel's face, the dismissive tone in Sarah's voice. This was no isolated incident. This was systemic, a cancer inside Aero Elite's reputation. She thought back to her grandmother, who had grown up the granddaughter of a freed slave, who always told her, justice is not about anger. It is about precision. Revenge shouts. Justice whispers until the world can't ignore it. Those words became her compass now. She did not need to raise her voice. She needed to cut with precision. She leaned slightly forward, catching Daniel's eye as he passed by again. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but the words carried weight. Daniel, what's your company's stance on racial bias? Could you explain it clearly? His eyes flickered with unease. He hesitated, muttered something vague about treating passengers equally, and quickly walked away. Olivia marked the time, the response, and pressed a button on her watch. Another piece of evidence captured, across the aisle. Thompson and Ellis chuckled quietly. convinced she was making a fuss about nothing. Seat 1A must be cursed, Ellis whispered to Thompson, both men laughing into their champagne. Olivia let the laughter pass like smoke. She had no need to argue with them. Soon, they would witness the weight of truth. Meanwhile, Maya worked furiously in Manhattan. She dug deeper, finding that Daniel had posted comments online years ago mocking diversity programs, calling them political stunts. She attached screenshots to the report, highlighting his history of dismissive behavior. The report had already grown to 12 pages, filled with charts, time analyses, and annotated evidence. Maya messaged Olivia. "Draft ready. Sending to Robert Kane now." Olivia knew Robert Kane, CEO of Aero Elite, a seasoned executive, 55, a man who prided himself on the airline's pristine reputation. But Olivia also knew she had leverage. Harper Innovations held a $50 million annual contract with Aero Elite for cybersecurity infrastructure. That contract alone gave her weight in the boardroom. If Kane didn't act, she could pull the contract and go public, a double blow that would shake the airline to its core. She typed a quick message to Maya. Attach note. Either immediate action or I go public within 24 hours. Use hashtag Seat1A. Sarah, still oblivious to the trap tightening around her, leaned close to Daniel in the galley, her voice strained but dismissive. She's overreacting. She'll forget this by landing. They always do. Daniel shrugged, unconcerned. She's just one passenger. Nothing will come of it. Their words were picked up again by Olivia's watch, their arrogance weaving the rope that would hang them. Olivia turned her gaze to the window, the sun glowing against the wing, and steadied her breath. She remembered her 2015 battle, the lawsuit against a partner who had tried to edge her out of a contract because he didn't trust women with tech. She had won that case, not by shouting, but by presenting irrefutable evidence. Millions in damages had been awarded, but more importantly, a precedent had been set. Today, the strategy was the same: patience, evidence, timing. She began outlining her confrontation plan. Step 1. Gather absolute proof. Service disparities, biased remarks, prior history. Step 2. Confront Daniel directly, not with anger but with questions that exposed his ignorance. Step 3. Build pressure by sending the report to Kane mid-flight, ensuring that by the time they landed, Aero Elite's leadership would already be scrambling. Step 4. Demand systemic reform, not just an apology. This wasn't about her meal anymore. This was about every passenger who had been slighted, silenced, or humiliated. She typed a final note to Maya. Also, collect passenger posts. Social media can amplify faster than any press release. Maya responded almost instantly. Already done. 2 passengers are tweeting about slow service toward you. One uploaded a photo of you waiting while others were served champagne. Hashtags forming. Small now, but growing. Olivia allowed herself the smallest smile. The tide was shifting. By the time the plane touched down at LAX, she wouldn't be the only one speaking. The voices of witnesses, the weight of evidence, and the power of social media would merge into one undeniable storm. Sarah reappeared at her seat, dropping a napkin with the forced smile of someone pretending nothing was wrong. "Anything else I can get you?" "Ma'am?" Olivia looked up, her gaze steady. "Yes. Your name is Sarah Jenkins, correct? Badge AE7421? The color drained from Sarah's face. "How do you know that?" Olivia's voice remained calm. "I make it my business to know who serves me." Sarah muttered something about privacy, but her confidence cracked. Daniel watched from the galley, uneasy now, sensing a shift he couldn't name. Olivia folded her hands over the untouched sandwich, her voice soft but cutting. "The thing about bias is, it always believes it's hidden. But technology sees what bias hopes to bury, and once the evidence exists, denial is impossible." She didn't need to say more. The message was clear. the trap nearly complete. The plane began its slow descent into California skies, the announcement of the captain echoing through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Los Angeles in about 30 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts for most passengers." It was a routine landing. For Sarah and Daniel, it would be the beginning of an unraveling. For Olivia, it was the moment she had prepared for her entire life, the chance to turn humiliation into transformation. She closed her phone, secure in the knowledge that Maya's report was already sitting in Robert Kane's inbox, its subject line bold, its contents undeniable. She whispered to herself, her grandmother's words steadying her heart once more. Justice whispers, until the world can't ignore it. This was her counterstrike plan, not with fury, but with truth, precision, and timing that would leave no room for excuses. And as the city of Los Angeles appeared beneath the clouds, Olivia Harper knew the moment of reckoning was only minutes away. The plane glided over the Midwest sky, steady in its course. But inside seat 1A, Olivia Harper was anything but idle. What had begun as a simple insult, a cold sandwich in place of her pre-ordered lobster and steak, was now transforming into a case file that could dismantle a crew and shake an airline's reputation. With every minute, her assistant Maya Ruiz in Manhattan uncovered more on Olivia's secure line. Maya's voice came through, calm but tight with urgency. "Olivia, I dug deeper into Sarah Jenkins. It's not just 4 complaints, it's 6, spanning 2 years, all from passengers of color, different routes, same behavior. She consistently downgraded meals, delayed service, or made dismissive comments. 3 of those cases ended in written warnings that were quietly buried by management." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. 6 complaints. A pattern not only visible but undeniable. She thought of the passengers who had endured this treatment and said nothing, thinking they were alone, thinking their voices would never matter. She whispered back, "Send me the files." Every word. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. Documents filled the screen, summaries, transcripts, signatures from supervisors who chose to minimize bias rather than confront it. Each one a mark against Sarah, each one a testament to a system that looked away. Maya didn't stop there. Daniel Hayes. She continued, her fingers flying across her keyboard in New York, has multiple notes in his personnel file. 2 female flight attendants lodged complaints for sexist remarks in crew lounges. One report quotes him saying women should stick to serving, not flying. The complaints went nowhere. He also had a disciplinary note for ignoring a disabled passenger's request for assistance, labeling them as needy. Olivia's grip on her phone tightened. This wasn't just bias. It was a pattern of cruelty wrapped in uniform. She thought of Maya herself, who years earlier had been denied a promotion at her previous job because her boss claimed customers preferred men. Olivia had hired Maya not just for her skills, but because she knew what it felt like to fight uphill battles no one else could see. She whispered into her watch, her tone firm but compassionate. "Maya, this isn't only about me. This is for all of us who've been told to swallow injustice quietly. This report is our voice." Maya's reply came fast. "Already drafting the final file. I've attached service time disparities, complaint records, even internal chat logs where Sarah wrote about preferring high-tipping white men. We now have audio, video, and written proof. I'm marking it for legal review. This isn't a request anymore. It's a demand." Olivia allowed herself a breath, her gaze fixed on the clouds below. Her mother's words echoed in her memory. Outsmart. Don't outshout. That wisdom had saved her countless times. From hostile boardrooms to biased negotiations, now, once again. Silence armed with evidence would be her weapon. In the galley. Sarah paced nervously, sensing something but unable to name it. She whispered to Daniel, "She keeps watching me. I think she knows something." Daniel shrugged. sipping water with casual arrogance. She's bluffing. They all bluff. Management never cares. Don't worry, it'll pass. Sarah shook her head, her stomach tightening. But she asked for my badge number. She said my name out loud. How did she know? Daniel leaned back, smirking. She's just trying to scare you. They had no idea their whispers were being captured, their words preserved in crystal clarity by Olivia's watch. Olivia tapped another note into her phone. Final report to Robert Kane. Deadline for response. Immediate suspension upon landing. She knew Robert, knew his weakness. He valued reputation above all else. A scandal like this, hitting social media, trending with the hashtag Maya had suggested, hashtag Seat1A, would spread faster than any damage control. Olivia's message was already clear. Act before this lands in the public square. The flight crossed into western skies, the sunlight pouring through cabin windows, golden against leather seats and champagne glasses. Passengers remained oblivious to the storm brewing. Thompson whispered to Ellis, "She's still at it," tapping on her phone like she's filing a lawsuit. Ellis chuckled. Dismissive. These people always threaten, never follow through. Olivia heard every word, noted the arrogance, and stayed silent. She had learned long ago not to waste energy on bystanders. When the hammer fell, even they would feel the shock. Maya's voice returned, stronger now. Olivia, I just got word from an inside source. Kane has already seen the report. He's in Chicago right now. Called an emergency meeting with the regional director. They're discussing immediate suspension of the crew after landing. Olivia's lips curved slightly. Good. But don't let them think suspension is enough. Prepare a public deadline. If systemic reforms aren't announced within 24 hours, we go public with everything, Maya replied without hesitation. Already drafting the press release. You'll have final approval. Olivia leaned back, the sandwich untouched before her, and gazed at the skyline of memories behind her eyes. She thought of the young Olivia at MIT, accused falsely of theft. The young CEO turned away from investors who couldn't see past her skin. The leader mistaken for an assistant at her own company's product launch. Each insult had shaped her, not by breaking her, but by sharpening her resolve. This moment wasn't only for her dignity, it was for every voice ignored, every complaint buried, every passenger silenced in the name of keeping peace. The captain's voice broke the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into Los Angeles. Please prepare for landing. Around her. Passengers buckled seatbelts. Attendants prepared the cabin. But for Olivia, the descent wasn't just physical. It was the closing act of an injustice and the opening of a reckoning. She messaged Maya one last time before touchdown. Go public in 24 hours if no action. Confirm suspension. Collect all passenger accounts. Maya's reply sealed the moment. Already confirmed. Suspension order is drafted. Passenger testimonies are rolling in online. Olivia, the tide is turning. By the time you land, the world will know. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. Calm, focused, resolute. She wasn't just a CEO on a flight anymore. She was the voice of accountability in an industry that thrived on silence. The investigation had expanded beyond Sarah and Daniel. It was no longer just about one meal, or one insult, or one woman in Seat 1A. It was about every hidden act of discrimination, every buried file, every complaint ignored, and as the wheels prepared to touch California soil, Olivia knew the reckoning would not wait. It had already begun. The wheels kissed the runway at Los Angeles International Airport with a heavy thud. But for Olivia Harper, the real landing was yet to come. The descent had been calm. The cabin crew's voices rehearsed. The passengers lulled into the ordinary rhythm of arrival. Yet beneath that calm surface, a storm waited on the ground as the plane taxied toward its gate. Olivia sat motionless in Seat 1A, her sandwich untouched, her eyes steady, her phone glowing faintly with Maya's updates. The moment she had prepared for her entire career was here. Not the billion-dollar contracts, not the Silicon Valley victories, but the chance to force accountability in a place that had dismissed her dignity. She thought back to her mother's words. Dignity is not what they give you. It's what you protect. Today, she would protect it not only for herself, but for thousands who never could. The captain's voice announced, "Welcome to Los Angeles. Please remain seated until the aircraft has reached the gate." Passengers stirred. Phones buzzed back to life. Laughter filled the cabin again. But Olivia knew within minutes silence would fall. Tension would cut through the air, and truth would demand its due. At the gate. The door opened with its usual chime, but waiting outside were not just airport staff. Michael Lee, Aero Elite's West Coast Regional Director, and Laura Chen, the airline's lawyer, stood stiff-backed in dark suits. Their expressions were not welcoming. They were grave, almost apologetic. Olivia gathered her slim leather bag, stood tall, and stepped into the jet bridge. Michael approached quickly, his voice hushed. "Ms. Harper, we are aware of the situation. We'll be handling it immediately. We deeply apologize." Olivia's gaze didn't waver. "Apologies aren't enough. Mr. Lee, what matters is what you do next, behind her." The cabin stirred with curiosity. Sarah Jenkins exited with forced composure, her face pale, Daniel Hayes at her side trying to look unbothered. They froze when they saw Michael and Laura waiting. Michael's voice hardened. "Sarah Jenkins. Daniel Hayes. You are being escorted for immediate review. Please follow us." Passengers spilled into the jet bridge. Whispers spreading. Thompson muttered. "Didn't think she'd pull this off." Ellis shook his head. "She's making a scene," but Ramirez, usually smug, remained silent. His eyes narrowed with sudden realization. This wasn't noise. It was power in motion. Sarah stammered as Laura handed her a printed file. "What is this?" Her voice faltered as she scanned the pages. Service time charts, complaint records, her own internal emails quoted back to her. "Prioritize high-tipping white men." She looked up, wide-eyed, and saw Olivia standing calmly, watching without anger but with unshakable resolve. "I didn't mean it," Sarah whispered, tears rising. "I was under pressure. It wasn't what it looked like." Daniel tried to intervene. "This is overblown. Everyone makes mistakes." Laura's voice was cold. "Precise. This is not a mistake. It is a pattern, and we have the evidence." Olivia's phone buzzed. Maya's face appeared on the secure video call, projected clearly for all to see. Her voice was crisp. "Ms. Harper, the suspension order has been filed. Sarah Jenkins and Daniel Hayes are grounded effective immediately. The CEO has confirmed a 30-flight probe across the network." Sarah gasped, her knees weakening. "Please, let me explain. I have a daughter." But Michael cut her off. "This is not the place. You'll have your chance to respond in formal hearings." Olivia stepped forward, her voice soft yet cutting. This was never about a meal. This was about dignity. And dignity is non-negotiable. Sarah sobbed quietly, realizing her career was slipping away. Daniel clenched his jaw, still unwilling to admit fault. "You think firing us fixes anything? The system won't change." Olivia looked directly at him. "That's where you're wrong. The system will change because silence ended today." As the group walked toward a secured conference room near the gate, news had already begun to spread. Maya whispered through Olivia's earpiece. Hashtag Seat 1A is trending, already at 100,000 posts. Passengers uploaded video of Sarah whispering about you being lucky. The public is watching. Olivia's resolve hardened. Inside the conference room, Aero Elite's leadership joined by video link. Robert Kane, the CEO, his face tense, and members of the board dialing in. Kane spoke quickly, his voice clipped. "Ms. Harper, I have reviewed your report. This is unacceptable. Sarah and Daniel will be terminated pending final review. We will overhaul our training, and we want you to join us as a consultant to lead reforms." Olivia's response was measured. "This isn't about me joining for appearance's sake. If I agree, it will be to implement real change, mandatory anti-bias training, transparent complaint tracking, accountability reports made public, no buried files, no excuses." Kane nodded grimly. "Agreed. We'll make it happen." Sarah tried one last time, her voice trembling. "Please, Ms. Harper, I've made mistakes, but I'm not hateful. I just—" Olivia raised a hand gently, stopping her. "I don't hate you, Sarah, but I can't excuse you. You had choices. You ignored them. Now, accountability arrives." Tears streaked Sarah's face. For the first time, she seemed to see herself clearly, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an actor in her downfall. Daniel looked away, jaw clenched, refusing reflection. At that moment, Olivia felt no triumph, only a solemn weight. Power wasn't in destroying people, it was in forcing change. She turned back to Kane's image on the screen. "This cannot end with 2 firings. If you want me involved, we start tomorrow. We build systems that make sure this never happens again." Kane exhaled, defeated but resigned. "You have my word." That evening, Olivia checked into her Beverly Hills hotel. The city glittered outside, but her mind was heavy with the day's events. She thought of her grandmother's words, her mother's resilience, Maya's loyalty. She thought of every passenger silenced over the years, their voices ignored. Tonight, they had spoken through her. The confrontation was over, but the fight for reform was just beginning. She opened her laptop, drafted her statement, and ended with one line that would echo across social media by morning. "Dignity is not optional. Seat 1A is reserved for change," within hours of landing in Los Angeles. What had started as a quiet act of bias on Aero Elite Flight 452 erupted into a national conversation. Olivia Harper's report, paired with passenger videos and Maya Ruiz's strategic release of evidence, ignited the internet. The hashtag Seat1A surged across social platforms, racking up over 500,000 posts by nightfall. Clips of Sarah Jenkins whispering that Olivia was lucky to even be there circulated on TikTok, gathering millions of views, while screenshots of the internal Aero Elite messages prioritizing high-tipping white men spread like wildfire on X and Instagram. By dawn, the New York Times headline read, "Black CEO faces discrimination in first class, Aero Elite in crisis." The Washington Post followed with an editorial, "When bias flies at 35,000 feet." CNN invited aviation analysts and civil rights leaders to discuss the implications live on air. The ripple was not just media noise, it was accountability unfolding in real time. Inside Aero Elite headquarters in Chicago, Robert Kane convened an emergency board session. Their glossy conference room, usually reserved for quarterly earnings calls, became a war room. Charts of plummeting social sentiment lined the screen. Shareholders demanded answers, and regulators hinted at investigations. The airline could no longer claim isolated incident. Kane's voice trembled as he addressed the room. "We are bleeding credibility. This is not just PR damage, it's systemic failure." Board chair Elizabeth Morgan leaned forward. "We cannot sweep this away. We must rebuild trust. And Ms. Harper is the key in that moment." Olivia Harper's leverage was undeniable. Meanwhile, Sarah Jenkins and Daniel Hayes faced the consequences. Their terminations were confirmed within 24 hours. Sarah, devastated, sat in her small Los Angeles apartment staring at the official notice on her phone. Tears streamed as she whispered to her daughter, "I lost my job." For the first time, she confronted the reality that her small biases were not invisible. They had destroyed her career. Therapy sessions began soon after, and in time she would seek redemption by volunteering at an anti-bias nonprofit. Daniel, however, remained defiant to friends. He called the scandal an overreaction, but no airline would hire him again. His record was too public, too damning. For Olivia, the confrontation wasn't about vengeance. It was about transformation. At a tech conference the following day, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by a standing ovation. Her keynote address carried the clarity of lived experience. This isn't about one meal, one flight, or one woman in seat 1A. This is about a system that normalizes silence. We are done being silent. Her words reverberated across the industry. News outlets replayed the speech. Civil rights organizations quoted her, and within a week, Aero Elite officially announced her role as a consultant leading reforms. The reforms were sweeping. 10,000 staff underwent mandatory anti-bias and equity training. Supervised by external experts, Aero Elite launched a transparent complaint tracking system, ensuring that no passenger's grievance could be buried. They pledged quarterly accountability reports made public. With metrics on service equity and diversity, Robert Kane himself faced internal review and pledged to increase diversity in management by 30% within a year. Stock analysts initially predicted a downturn, but customers rallied. Finally, one frequent flyer wrote, "An airline that admits failure and chooses change." Bookings rebounded within weeks, proving that accountability could build stronger loyalty than denial. Maya Ruiz, once the loyal assistant working behind the scenes, stepped into the spotlight. Olivia publicly credited her for the digital forensics that made the case undeniable. Kane offered Maya a formal promotion as chief technology consultant for Aero Elite's audit systems, a recognition of both her talent and resilience. For Maya, who had once been sidelined in her career due to sexism, the moment was personal triumph. She texted Olivia late one night, "We didn't just fight for justice, we built a new system." Olivia replied simply, "And it's only the beginning." The ripple spread beyond Aero Elite. Competitor airlines, fearing similar scandals, voluntarily implemented reforms. Delta, United, and Horizon all announced enhanced bias monitoring, digital reporting systems, and partnerships with civil rights organizations. In just 3 months, industry watchdogs reported a 40% reduction in discrimination-related complaints. The numbers told a story of progress, but it was Olivia's quiet insistence on action that gave those numbers life. In the broader public sphere, #Seat1A became a symbol. Social media filled with stories of everyday people recalling their own experiences. Black mothers overlooked by attendants. Latina travelers questioned about their tickets. Asian passengers stereotyped and dismissed. Thousands of posts carried the phrase, "This is my #Seat1A moment." It was no longer just Olivia's fight, it had become a collective reckoning. Churches preached about it, universities studied it, and high school students debated it in classrooms. Sarah, in her quiet path toward redemption, began speaking at small community gatherings. "I thought my words didn't matter." She confessed to one group, but they did. They shaped how I treated people. And now I live with the consequences. The honesty, though painful, began to heal her fractured sense of self. She was no longer a flight attendant, but she was becoming something else, a cautionary tale, and perhaps one day, an advocate. Olivia, meanwhile, launched the Harper Dignity Fund, pledging $1 million to combat discrimination in corporate and service industries. Grants supported training programs, scholarships, and advocacy groups within weeks. The fund had received donations from CEOs, celebrities, and ordinary citizens moved by the story. Olivia's message was simple: bias doesn't end with a policy. It ends when we all decide silence is no longer acceptable. At Harper Innovations, the ripple was just as powerful. Employees felt pride that their CEO had not only defended her dignity, but had redefined accountability for an entire industry. Internal surveys showed a 20% increase in staff engagement, a rare leap in corporate culture. Investors praised Olivia's leadership not just for financial vision, but for moral clarity. The company's valuation surged, proving that ethics and profit need not be enemies. By the end of that week, Olivia walked through LAX once more, this time not as a victim of bias, but as a leader of reform. Travelers recognized her, some stopping to say thank you, others simply nodding with respect. She did not bask in fame. She carried the weight of responsibility. Seat 1A had become more than a number. It was a reminder etched into public memory, Olivia whispered to herself. It was never about a seat. It was about a voice. The fallout had begun with humiliation, but the ripple effect transformed humiliation into a movement. In the months to come, the plaque reserved for change would appear in Aero Elite's first-class cabins, a silent reminder that dignity belongs to everyone. And Olivia Harper's name would forever be tied to a simple truth. Power is not in the noise of outrage, but in the precision of action, the patience of evidence, and the courage to demand better. 3 months later, as the crisp light of another September morning filled the first-class cabin of Aero Elite Flight 452, Olivia Harper once again took her seat in 1A. This time, the tray before her did not hold a cold sandwich, but a small engraved plaque gleaming against the leather, reserved for change. The gesture was quiet, almost humble, but its symbolism thundered. The seat that once carried humiliation now carried history. As the crew moved with respectful efficiency, Olivia felt the weight of what had unfolded since that day in New York. The incident had ignited more than just firings or headlines. It had reshaped the entire conversation about dignity in the air and beyond. She remembered the firestorm of those first weeks, hashtag Seat 1A dominating social platforms, Aero Elite's swift reforms, the Harper Dignity Fund swelling with donations. But as weeks turned into months, what mattered most was not the noise, but the transformation that settled into daily life. Small changes multiplied across thousands of flights and millions of passengers. Complaints had dropped, training programs flourished, accountability reports were published openly. For the first time, passengers of color and women traveling alone reported feeling visible, respected, heard. That was the real legacy, quiet shifts that would outlast headlines. As Olivia leaned back, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a letter she had written to a 16-year-old girl in Chicago, now posted publicly with permission. The girl had written to her weeks earlier. "I'm scared to speak up at school. I don't think people listen to girls like me." Olivia's reply had been firm yet gentle. Act at the right time. Don't stay silent. They may not listen now, but one day your voice will be the only one that changes everything. That letter, shared online, had gone viral in its own right. Teachers printed it for classrooms, churches read it during sermons, parents tucked it into their daughters' notebooks. Olivia smiled softly. She knew her role wasn't just to fight her battles. It was to plant courage in others to fight theirs. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man glanced at her, recognition dawning. He whispered to his wife, "That's the woman from Seat 1A." But unlike before, there was no smirk, no doubt, only respect. Olivia nodded politely, returning to her notes for the upcoming conference in Los Angeles, where she would speak not about AI or cybersecurity, but about accountability and reform. Her reputation as a CEO had grown, but now she carried something larger, a role as a cultural leader, an example of dignity wielded as power. Meanwhile, Sarah Jenkins had begun her own quiet journey of redemption. Fired and disgraced, she had nearly lost herself in bitterness, but therapy opened her eyes to the roots of her prejudice. By the second month, she had joined an anti-bias nonprofit, speaking not as a victim but as someone who had contributed to the problem. "I thought my actions didn't matter," She confessed to a room of volunteers. But they did. I hurt people without even knowing. I can't erase what I did, but I can stop others from repeating it. Her sincerity began to resonate, slowly. Sarah was building a different legacy, not of arrogance, but of responsibility. Olivia, hearing of Sarah's progress through Maya, felt no malice. Redemption matters too. She told Maya, "We need stories of change, even for those who failed." Daniel Hayes, by contrast, refused to reflect, blacklisted from the airline industry. He drifted from job to job, convinced the world had turned unfairly against him. His defiance became his prison, and his name a reminder of arrogance unrepented. For Olivia, he was no longer her concern. The lesson was clear. Not everyone chooses change. At Aero Elite, reforms became culture rather than crisis management. The Harper Standards, as staff began to call them, were taught in every new training session: equity in service, transparency in complaints, dignity without exception. Quarterly reports tracked measurable progress, with graphs showing sharp declines in bias-related incidents. Passengers noticed. Travel blogs praised the airline's turnaround, some calling it the Aero Elite awakening. What once was scandal had become a blueprint for the industry. Other airlines adopted similar reforms, and soon the Department of Transportation cited Aero Elite as a case study in corporate accountability. Harper Innovations, Olivia's company, flourished in parallel. Investors were proud to be associated with a leader who balanced profit with principle. Clients increased contracts, not only for technology, but for consulting on ethics in corporate systems. Olivia never marketed herself as a diversity leader, yet her actions had positioned her as exactly that. Maya Ruiz, now promoted and recognized, became the architect of Aero Elite's new audit systems. Her work celebrated at industry conferences. She often repeated Olivia's words, "Technology doesn't end bias, but it removes the shadows where bias hides." On the personal side, Olivia found peace in knowing her fight had meaning beyond herself. At community gatherings, people approached her with gratitude. A young mother who said attendance now treated her differently. An elderly man who finally felt respected when flying first class. A student inspired to challenge discrimination at her university. These stories, whispered with emotion, meant more to Olivia than the headlines ever could. As the flight to Los Angeles leveled at cruising altitude, the crew moved gracefully, serving with fairness and care. Olivia accepted her meal, this time exactly as ordered. Lobster salad followed by grilled steak. She took a bite, not in triumph, but in quiet reflection. Her grandmother's voice filled her memory again. Justice whispers, until the world can't ignore it. That whisper had become a roar, then settled back into silence. But a different kind of silence, the kind born of dignity restored. When she landed in Los Angeles, Olivia was greeted not with apologies or suspicion, but with honor. At the conference, she delivered her keynote to a packed hall. "The lesson of Seat 1A, she said. Is that true? Power doesn't need shouting. It needs clarity, patience, and courage. Silence in the face of injustice protects no one, but evidence, action, and resolve transform everything." The audience rose in applause, some with tears, others with renewed determination. Her words were no longer just her story. They belonged to everyone listening. Later that evening, in her Beverly Hills hotel room, Olivia opened her journal. She wrote one final reflection about the journey. "I was given a sandwich when I had ordered steak. They thought they diminished me. But what they handed me was not humiliation. It was the beginning of change. Seat 1A no longer belongs to me. It belongs to anyone who refuses silence. It belongs to every voice waiting to be heard." She closed the journal, set it beside her, and gazed out at the Los Angeles skyline. The lights shimmered, alive with possibility. the legacy of Seat 1A would not fade. It would live in the plaque engraved on Aero Elite flights. It would live in passengers who felt seen, in workers trained to honor dignity, in industries now measuring equity not as a slogan, but as a standard. It would live in Sarah's redemption, Maya's rise, Olivia's courage, and the countless unnamed who found their voices because one woman chose not to stay silent. And the lesson, simple yet eternal, would echo for generations. True power does not shout. True power acts at the right moment and leaves a world forever changed. Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. Your encouragement means so much. If this story moves you, drop a comment, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can share more truths and justice together.